The world's newest axis of adversaries, Russia, China, and Iran, it's less a formidable brotherhood of tyrants and more, well, a shaky business deal built on quicksand and opportunism. Welcome to your deep dive. Our mission today is, frankly, critical. We need to unpack the cold, hard reality of the partnership, or maybe the alignment between Russia, China, and Iran.
It's so important we do this now. I mean, global tensions have just escalated so dramatically.
Right. You see the Iranian foreign minister meeting with President Putin in Moscow, and then our sources point to this extreme stress test. The scenario is modeled after the so-called 12-day war.
The hypothetical conflict from June 2025.
Yeah.
You're talking about the one involving these devastating U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
Exactly. And the narrative they project is this seamless strategic unity. But our analysis, when you really dig in, it proves this relationship is fundamentally tactical, not strategic.
This is a marriage of convenience. And it's defined by self-interest and some really profound internal mistrust. What's so fascinating is that while they share one clear goal, fostering a multipolar world.
A world where the U.S. holds less sway.
Precisely. But when you look right under the surface, the sources of friction, especially China's own economic priorities, they completely outweigh any real commitment to Tehran.
So we're going straight to the core here. We need to measure just how weak this tactical triangle really is. Because if you can understand their internal cracks, you understand how much leverage the U.S. and its allies truly have. So, okay, if it isn't some grand unified strategy, what actually binds them together right now? Is there like a shared ideology?
No, not at all. Fundamentally, the common thread is purely reactive. It's opposition to what they call Western hegemony.
Right. U.S. unilateralism, sanctions, that whole package.
That's it. That is the beginning and the end of their unity.
Yeah.
So you could say it's the negative space that defines the arrangement.
And within that negative space, Iran plays a very specific transactional role. It's a geopolitical lever for its two bigger partners.
That's the perfect term for it. For Russia, Iran is a strategic distraction. Moscow uses Tehran to stretch U.S. attention to pull resources away from, say, Ukraine.
So if Washington is focused on the Strait of Hormuz, it's less focused on Eastern Europe. Simple as that.
Exactly. And for China, the calculation is a bit different. It's rooted in geography and trade. China uses Iran as a political buffer.
A buffer to do what?
To secure those vital overland energy routes from Central Asia and, to complicate the U.S. military presence in the Gulf. That's a huge long-term concern for Beijing.
Which is why the sources are so clear that the alliance lacks a shared ideological foundation. It's all just reactive.
It is, and you see the hypocrisy immediately. They're constantly talking about the sacred principles of sovereignty and non-intervention.
Only when it suits them.
Of course. That commitment it vanishes the second their own ambitions are on the line. I mean, look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Or China's aggression in the Taiwan Strait. Suddenly, sovereignty is just a, quote, political tool. It's rhetoric to attack the West, and that's it.
They violate the principle themselves to advance their own interests.
So it's transactional. And the biggest factor in those transactions is always money. And this is where that lack of loyalty just gets exposed immediately.
The fragility of this whole triangle is clearest when you look at China's economic approach. Our sources call it the dual pillar strategy.
Okay, break that down.
So pillar one. China wants Iran stable enough to act as that political buffer we talked about and to be a secure, discounted oil supplier.
Okay, that makes sense. But that's only one pillar. What's the other one?
The second pillar is the one that always wins. It's China's focus on high-value, broad economic partnerships with the wealthy Gulf states, the GCC,
Saudi Arabia, the UAE.
Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait. These are the big-ticket items. They offer huge investment opportunities that Iran just can't match.
And China has shown it's willing to risk a serious diplomatic fight with Tehran to protect those bigger relationships.
Oh, absolutely. The clearest example was the fallout from the December 2022 China-GCC joint statement.
Remind us what happened there.
Well, in that statement, China publicly backed the UAE's efforts for a peaceful solution to the dispute over 3 key islands in the Strait of Hormuz.
Greater Tum, Lesser Tum, and Abu Musa.
The very same. Now, Iran has controlled those islands since the 70s and considers its sovereignty over them eternal and permanent.
So for China to even suggest a peaceful solution was a direct challenge to Iran's territorial integrity.
It was volcanic. Tehran's reaction was, we saw unusually sharp public criticism from the hardliners, the very people who pushed for this look east policy. They felt betrayed.
I remember this. A conservative lawmaker, Ahmad Naderi, he basically warned Beijing, right?
He did. He openly said China cannot hold the one China principle over Taiwan as a red line while applying double standards to Iran.
So for you listening, that's like your main business partner publicly siding with your neighbor in a major property dispute. It's a huge insult.
It's more than an insult. Hardline media in Iran actually suggested they could retaliate by questioning China's sovereignty over Taiwan.
Wow.
That threat alone, just questioning the core of Chinese statehood, it shows you who is last among equals here. China is not committed to Iran's survival. It's committed to global profit.
And Iran has to take it because of its, well, its devastating economic reality. China is its primary crude importer.
And it benefits hugely from U.S. sanctions. Because those sanctions have choked off almost every other buyer, Iran is forced to offer China these massive oil discounts.
Massive.
Up to 30% below global market prices.
30%. That is an enormous financial bleed. We're talking billions of dollars in lost revenue that Tehran is forced to hand over to Beijing just to stay afloat.
Exactly. It shows the tangible effectiveness of a strong sanctions posture. When you force your adversary to choose between selling at a crippling discount or not selling at all, they pick the discount.
All right, so let's move to the ultimate test of any alliance. A military crisis. When push came to shove, what happened?
Well, the so-called alliance offered political cover, but absolutely no physical defense.
This goes back to that 12-day war scenario.
Right. In that simulation, U.S. and Israeli strikes hit key Iranian nuclear sites, Isfahan, Natanz, Fordo. Tehran expected real, tangible support from Moscow and Beijing.
And the reality?
The reality, according to the analysis, was brutal. Beijing's response was limited to a delayed condemnation. No tangible assistance, no military aid, nothing.
They just stayed away.
They stayed away. They were desperate to avoid a full-scale confrontation with the West that would threaten their global supply chains.
And this isn't an accident. You can see it in their official agreements.
Absolutely. The Strategic Cooperation Agreement signed between Russia and Iran in January 2025, it notably and very deliberately omitted a mutual defense clause.
So neither Moscow nor Beijing is on the hook to defend Tehran.
Not at all. In fact, Russia actively avoids selling some of its most advanced military systems to Iran, specifically to avoid provoking Israel.
It's a policy of calculated avoidance.
That's it. They want to prevent a total regime collapse because that would be messy, but they will not fight for Tehran.
And the cost of this is now hitting home. Iranian analysts admit their defense capabilities were exposed, that they were technologically backward.
Yeah, the life insurance policy from China and Russia,
Yeah.
it failed exactly when they needed to cash it. Which brings up a really human question. What is all this costing the Iranian people?
The sanctions, the failed look east policy, it's a slow-motion catastrophe for the population. We're seeing a massive migration crisis.
The numbers are staggering. Roughly 1 in every 15 Iranians now lives outside the country.
1 in 15?
Driven by economic pressure, corruption, political anxiety, you name it. And asylum registrations surged right after the Trump administration withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018.
When the economic screws tightened, people voted with their feet.
And now you're seeing that internal criticism bubble up. Iranian experts are openly frustrated that the 25-year deal with China is just symbolic. They say Beijing just sees Iran as a card to be played against Washington.
The analysis from inside Iran is damning. They criticize their own leadership for passivity and one-dimensional thinking.
Meaning they just saw China as an oil buyer and failed to build any real strategic depth. They squandered their chances to get weapons and technology, and now they're vulnerable.
And to add insult to injury, Russia and Iran are now direct rivals in the oil market.
They are. Russia, pushed out of Europe, is now selling its discounted oil to China, competing directly with Tehran for the same customer.
So when you put it all together, a deep lack of trust, crippling economic dependency, and internal competition. This is an alliance of convenience, and it is inherently fragile.
It's ripe for further principled pressure.
This deep dive really shows that the Russia-China-Iran partnership, it's less like a cohesive military bloc and more like a limited liability partnership.
I like that. Each partner invests just enough to keep the business of countering the U.S. running.
But they refuse to cover each other's security debts when a real crisis hits.
And that fragility, that foundational weakness, it just underscores the effectiveness of a firm, consistent, pressure-based strategy. The administration seems to be leveraging this not just in the Middle East, but closer to home.
And that's where we get to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Senator Lindsey Graham has argued that keeping a firm hand on adversaries in our own backyard is essential to this global posture.
Right, and you see that in the aggressive U.S. stance right now against Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, who is a key Iranian partner.
The U.S. has seriously ramped up military deployments. There are reports of strikes on alleged drug boats that have killed at least 87 people.
The official line is that Maduro runs a narco-terrorist state aligned with Hezbollah and Iran.
And President Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, was quoted saying the president wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. The goal, as Senator Graham put it, is cleaning up our backyard.
So you have to ask yourself, is this assertive display of strength in the Caribbean the clearest signal we can send to Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran? A signal that their influence, even in faraway places, will always face unwavering American resistance. It seems this administration sees a direct line between the security of the Caribbean and the stability of the Strait of Hormuz.
That's the deep dive for today. Go be well informed.